Hello and welcome to episode 3 of The Weekly Wash, which is my weekly video newsletter where I like to bring forth recommendations of things that I've enjoyed and that I think you will also enjoy. Rather than over briefing you, I'm just going to belly flop right into the pool of recommendations. And the first recommendation this week is the name of a studio. But the name of this studio is also the name of a man. And the name of that man is Gareth David. So Gareth David basically makes tutorials for computer software and posts videos on YouTube. If you watched the first episode of The Weekly Wash, and then 3 or 4 weeks later watched the second episode of The Weekly Wash, you might have noticed a few changes, particularly in the area of animation. And so what I did is I created a few animations just to spice things up a bit. There was actually an animation in the first episode actually where it was awful. It was like a little shoe dog slider that came across when I mentioned the book. But have a look in the second video if you haven't already. I made a few things. These animations wouldn't have been possible without Gareth David's tutorial series. It's a 48 episode tutorial series, which is mammoth, on After Effects, which is made by Adobe and is used for things like creating animations, less so cartoon animations and more graphics animations. You can also edit with that program. But he made this big ass tutorial series recently and I've just started getting into it. It wasn't sort of the influence of his series alone that helped me to create these things, because I'm still very much a beginner. But what's great about his tutorials is they give you a very base level of understanding. Like, he starts right at the beginning, you know, with things like the tools in the toolbar and what they mean and what each of the windows in the software mean. This tutorial for After Effects, which Gareth has created, is not actually his first tutorial series. He's made one for Illustrator. I think he made one for like general design principles, which will be very useful for me because I'm hopeless in that area at the moment. He made one for Photoshop as well, and I think he's working on something new right now, which I'm super excited for. But the After Effects one is the most in-depth. What sort of amazes me, the best thing about these tutorials is that all of them are free. I mean, what I will say is when you when you're watching this 48 episode After Effects tutorial, there is the option to buy the product folder on Gareth's website. And from what I know, I think this is the first time he's done this, because the Illustrator one, I remember being able to download it for free. But it's like £5.50. You can probably learn the principles without, but I would advise that you do fork out that £5. What is that, like 1.5 coffees? To be able to work alongside Gareth as he shows you some of the principles and uses of After Effects. It's a no-brainer. Like that amount of value for £5, or that amount of value for free if you just want to watch along. It's unreal, and that wouldn't be possible without the advertising sort of age that we're in. After Effects as a program is pretty intimidating. In fact, before I got started, I found all of the Adobe programs pretty intimidating. Even Photoshop. Premiere probably the least of all of them. But, you know, you feel intimidated and that might stop some people from getting stuck in. And what Gareth manages to do is kind of just demystify it a bit and sort of take these concepts and just open them out for anyone to understand. I'm a great believer in leverage and having access to and the skills to use programs like After Effects, Photoshop, Illustrator. It really increases the value that you can provide to either an employer or a client that you're serving. So there's a really high incentive to become skilled at using these programs, and Gareth offers you a great opportunity to do that with very, very little cost. Another great aspect of all of these, especially the Adobe programs, is that the functions are kind of universal. So once you've learned one, it's just a little bit easier to learn the next. Like, there'll be similar tools in Photoshop and Illustrator, and similarly in Premiere Pro and After Effects. That's really useful, because have to start again every time. That's one of the reasons I like Adobe a lot, is because they offer all of these different pieces of software, and you have to get a different one from different companies and that. A good parallel for this might be, say, learning one of the Romantic languages. I'm learning Portuguese now. Once I sort of get really good at that, then if I want to move on to Spanish or Italian, it will just be a bit less difficult, because a lot of the linguistic frameworks are similar. Anyway, that's Gareth David's studio. Just check the tutorials out now, see if there's something interesting there for you. Level up. The second recommendation of this video is a newsletter, and that newsletter is called Flow State. Every day, Flow State send out an email with a music recommendation inside. And that music is specifically chosen upon the basis that it will supplement your work. The title of the newsletter invokes their intention that the music that they send out to you will help to induce a flow state, defined by its creator, Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, I hope, as being completely involved in an activity for its own sake. The ego falls away, time flies, every action, movement and thought follows inevitably from the previous one, like playing jazz. Your whole being is involved and you're using your skills to the utmost. Entering a state of flow can vastly increase the quality and creativity of your work, and there's tons of information about the concept of flow online. It's super popular, has become so over the past couple of years, with the obsession with productivity and, I guess, skill optimization, work optimization. Go and read about it, just Google it, flow, and then I dare you to try and type in Mihai Csikszentmihalyi's name. See what comes up. I'm sure it will come up. Google's good like that, but it's harder to say than it is to spell. Back to the newsletter anyway. I'm really enjoying Flow State so far. I've only been subscribed for a few days, but I've gobbled up like probably all three composers or musicians that they've sent to me. I like music to be able to think to, music that isn't hyper intrusive, but also that kind of provides me with a rhythm to work to. And the music that they've sent me so far has been perfect for this. They've got two sort of levels of subscription. There's a free one and a paid one. I'm on the free one right now because I don't really have the money for that kind of thing. But I think if I did, then I probably would upgrade, just on the basis that what they're offering is really valuable, and it's good to pay people for doing good stuff. That's how the world works well, isn't it? Finally, the last recommendation I've got for you today is of a conversation between David Perell and Antony Pompliano. So I already really knew David Perell really well. I really like him, I really like the work that he does, I really like his writing, but I became aware of Antony Pompliano, also known as Pomp, when David Perell was on his podcast, and I've become a big fan of his already. Now, this conversation is about the process of building an audience online. One reason that I think Pomp is uniquely qualified to talk on this subject is because, as he mentions in the video, he only has one full-time employee, and apart from that, it's just him and his wife that do the work. And he's built a massive audience and a really successful business. The reason this is relevant is that I know that I personally, but I think most people, don't truly want to run some massive company with thousands of employees. Yes, we want to be successful, but we want to be successful in a way that is freeing and not constraining, which I think having your own massive company would do. I think that would be more constraining than it would give you freedom. Pomp's very clear from the beginning that if you're not truly interested and motivated in doing this, in building an audience online for your product or your creative output, say if you're a writer or you're making music or films, videos, if you don't truly want it, then he just says, just don't do it. I know it can be a bit annoying when someone begins one of these conversations by saying something like that, but it's a caveat that I really appreciate because it sets the tone of when you're trying to do something big, when you're trying to build something big, it's going to be really hard work. And people are always looking for shortcuts, and Shortcuts rarely get you there. And what Pomp's really trying to do is just say to you, don't waste your life unless you really want this. Life is short and you don't have time to go after something, spend a year doing something that you don't truly want to do. I mean, how many people find that out too late in their lives? And when you try something like this, I know this myself so very well, that things are gonna be a whole lot more uncomfortable and probably for a longer time than they will be sort of like comfortable and great. The time that you spend in discomfort trying to achieve the great thing is probably greater than the time you spent feeling good about yourself having achieved the great thing. I've barely really covered the content of the conversation itself because I'll leave that for you to go and listen to it. But just take my word on the fact that it's great and there are many, many implementable ideas about how to build a large audience on Twitter in particular, because as far as I'm concerned, as far as I can see and from my experience so far, Twitter is, for a writer anyway, Twitter is probably the best place to start from, scratch and build up from there. Cool, that's your 3 pieces of value for the week. I'm gonna leave it there. If you want the links, they should be in the description below and also at jackandthewash.com in the episode notes for each of the videos. There you can also check out the old episode notes and check out my writing about books, writing about films, personal articles, and other bits like that. I hope you've enjoyed the video and I look forward to making another video for you next week. See you then. Take care.